Thank you, Brandon Kennedy, for welcoming everybody to this event. Please show your appreciation for Brandon's music. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ashton Brown, and I will be Master of Ceremony for today's event. Before we get started, just because we're out in the Oval, I wish to remind everyone we still need to be wearing masks out here, so if we could please all mask up. Thank you. I wish to introduce Oliver Cotty to read the acknowledgement to country.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I would like to pay my respects to their people, both past and present, emerging. I would extend that respect to the Aboriginal Australians who are present.
I would like to welcome our guests today. I will now provide you all with some background as to why we commemorate this significant event. On February the 13th, 2008, Kevin Rudd spoke on behalf of the government and behalf of the Parliament of Australia to apologise for the hurt, the suffering, the pain that was caused in the 1910s to the 1970s. This timeline was known for the stolen generation, where many Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander families lost their culture, children, sisters, brothers, mothers and fathers. Kevin Rudd acknowledged the effects of the stolen generation still has on tens of thousands of families and individuals today, and addressed the question, why are we still apologising? We now come together for this special day and remember not only the grief, the past mistreatment, but also the new step in Australia's history for equality. We stand together. Our commemoration event today will include our guest, Trish Sermonara, chairperson of the local Aboriginal Education Consultative Group. Our student leaders will read the apology speech, and a response and thank you from our campus principal, Cassandra Walters. Please welcome to the podium Auntie Trish Sermonara.
Good morning, teachers, Wodonga Senior Secondary College staff and students. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in where we gather today, the Dudra people, and pay my respect to elders past, present and any emerging that may be among us. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders have acknowledged and welcomed people onto country for thousands of years. And when doing this, they would say, walk softly on country, be mindful and respectful on country. Listen to the water and the land as they hold the stories of our ancestors. Look after the land and the waterways, and the land and the waterways will in turn look after you. My name is Trish. I am a Gamilaroi woman from Walgett in New South Wales. I arrived in Albury in my early teens as part of the resettlement program. I'm the local Aboriginal Education Consultative Group chairperson. So between 1910 and the 1970s, many First Nations children were forcibly removed from their families, and this was because of a variety of government policies. The generations of children removed under these policies became known as the stolen generation. The forcible removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families was part of the policy of assimilation, which was based on the misguided assumption that the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people would be improved if we become part of white society. These stolen generations were raised on missions by foster parents, totally cut off from their Aboriginality. Many were stripped of their names and called by a number. And if caught speaking in their Aboriginal language, the only language that they knew, they were punished. By 1911, every mainland state and territory had introduced protection policies that subjected Aboriginal people to near total control and denied them basic human rights such as freedom to move about, custody of their own children, and control over their personal property. My nan called these the years of shame. Our grandparents form a really important part of our lives. My nan lived with us in Humpies on the outskirts of Yenda, a very small place near Griffith. Her country was in Meningie in Queensland. She was removed as part of the stolen generation and resettled under the resettlement program. My nan told me stories every day of how she wished that she could see her mother and father again. And she told me stories of how they would run and play. And while she did this, tears filled her eyes. I could never understand it. Nan told me of one of her sisters who was stolen and never to this day came home. Nan spoke of her sister's golden hair and how she would brush it with a turtle comb that her mother had made. And in doing this, she would say, "I do hope one day she comes home," but she never did. Another story Nan told me was the story of the Kurrajong tree and its beautiful flowers. I asked Nan one day what the flowers smelt like, and she said, "Like home." Nan said by remembering her childhood culture that it was the only way that she could stay connected to her country. So on February the 13th, 2008, Mr Kevin Rudd moved a motion of apology to Aboriginal Australians. His apology was a formal apology on behalf of the successive parliaments and governments whose policies and laws inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on our First Nations people. I stood in QE2 Square on that day with my elders, my family and my community. We all stood in that silent moment and we were so proud to hear those words. We are sorry. But in that still silent moment, tears still flowed. Stories became realities. Realities of lost family, lost time, lost land, lost culture, lost identity and the basic loss of human dignity. Even today, as I stand here and talk to you, Aboriginal people are still searching for lost family. Children are still being removed. We are still saddened as to why we were regarded as flora and fauna, not entitled to basic human rights like a house, a bed and water. So Kevin Rudd made the first step in acknowledging the wrongdoings of past governments' oppression policies. We, as Australians, and you all as young people, need to move forward so as to ensure that the wrongs of the past never happen again. And as I often say, I look around here today and I do not believe that anybody here is responsible for past governments' doings. But I do, however, believe that we are all responsible to ensure it never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnie Trish, for your very revealing presentation, and I will now call on Lorelei Kernaghan to make a small presentation. Thank you, Lorelei. I would like to invite two of the school leaders, Kaylin and Jilly, to read the apology.
That today we honour the Indigenous people of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We reflect on their past mistreatment. We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations, this blemished chapter in our nation's history. The time has now come for the nation to turn a new page in Australia's history by righting the wrongs of the past and so moving forward with confidence to the future. We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on these, our fellow Australians. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country. For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and their families left behind, we say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the sisters and the brothers, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry. And for the indignity and degradation thus inflicted on a proud people and a proud culture, we say sorry.
We, the Parliament of Australia, respectfully request that this apology be received in the spirit in which it is offered as part of the healing of the nation. For the future we take heart, resolving that this new page in the histories of our great continent can now be written. We, today, take this first step by acknowledging the past and laying claim to the future that embraces all Australians. A future where this Parliament resolved that the injustice of the past must never, never happen again. A future where we harness the determination of all Australians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to close the gap that lies between us in life expectancy, educational achievement, and economic opportunity. A future where we embrace the possibility of new solutions to enduring problems where old approaches have failed. A future based on mutual respect, mutual resolve, and mutual responsibility. A future where all Australians, whatever their origins, are truly equal partners, with equal opportunities and with an equal stake in shaping the next chapter in the histories of this great country, Australia.
Thank you, Caitlin and Jilly. I now call upon Campus Principal Cassandra Walters to address the assembled group.
Following Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's apology to Australia's Indigenous peoples, Dr Tom Calma, who was then the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, in his formal response to the apology stated, "Through one direct act, the Parliament has acknowledged the existence and the impacts of past policies and practices of forcibly removing Indigenous children and their families, and by doing so has paid respect to the stolen generations for their suffering and their loss, and for their resilience and ultimately for their dignity. Today, our college community has also paid respect to the stolen generations. Thank you to the students who've played various roles in our assembly, and to Ms. Sue Bell for her work behind the scenes to ensure its success. I would also like to say a special thank you to Auntie Trish Seminara for sharing some of her personal story with us and helping us to understand better the importance of the national apology. And finally, I'd like to thank our college community for the respect you have shown throughout this assembly. You make me very proud to be your campus principal.
Thank you to everyone for participating in our event today. I would like to invite our school captains and all the student presenters to remain behind for a group photograph. Thank you, and you are dismissed. Thank you.